While the French do a healthy business in shrugs and even, when equipped, mustached whirls, they are for the most part an undemonstrative people. Yet the Ford GT's abrupt transition to its track mode, the car dropping 2 inches as hydraulic actuators compress its supplemental coil springs, the rear wing rising with an equal suddenness, is impressive enough to coax a collective sigh of appreciation from the group of Le Mans corner workers and other informed spectators watching as the car readies itself to head on to the famous circuit. Although we've brought the new GT back to the site of its most celebrated racing win, the 2016 class victory taken in its first entry to the 24-hour race, this is not an exploration of what the car is capable of on a track. Our photographic use of Le Mans' short Bugatti circuit happens during a lunch break, and even though in France that equates to 2 hours, access is on the condition that we drive gently enough not to trip the noise meters. The bigger question, and the one we haven't been able to answer so far, is how the GT deals with the real world, or, at least, the approximation of that given to us by France. For that, we'd need to take the car on public roads, and it just so happens that some of the ones we choose are actually part of the classic Enduro circuit. The yellow car you see here lives in Europe but boasts full US spec, complete with red rear turn signals and a navigation system that refuses to acknowledge the existence of anything east of Maine. Up close, the GT also reveals the patina of a life lived hard, with swirling galaxies of stone chips on those parts of the lower bodywork not protected by helicopter tape. The odometer admits to just 6,500 miles, but the technicians who delivered the car to France and who are present to keep it in tune say the vast majority of those were accumulated on racetracks. For reference, the number 68 car that took class honors at Le Mans in 2016 covered 2,880 miles in 24 hours. Beyond France, we also extracted a full set of performance numbers from another GT in Michigan and later took that car to Virginia International Raceway to see how its lap time compared with some of the harder chargers. With production limited to just 250 units a year, that means a respectable percentage of the existing fleet has been employed to bring you this story. Let's start with the sticky subject of the numbers. Because while the GT is hugely fast, its raw figures are not as inspirational as they should be considering the price premium the car carries over blue-chip rivals. We know it is churlish to criticize any car capable of braking 60 miles per hour from a standstill in 3 seconds flat and turning in a sub-11-second quarter, yet the brutal truth is that those times are only sufficient to put the GT below the median of its insanely rapid segment. Both the Lamborghini Huracan Performante and the McLaren 720S are significantly quicker, and each is more than $150,000 cheaper. But then, those cars are practically mass-produced when compared with the GT, which will leave Multimatic's assembly plant in Markham, Ontario, at the rate of no more than 1 a day. The Ford's twin-turbo V6 was also chosen for reasons beyond mere horsepower, with GTE Pro regulations using a Byzantine balance of performance calculation to wind back challengers with too much firepower. The heavily reworked 3.5-liter EcoBoost gives the GT a tangential link to the lower reaches of the Ford range and is also compact enough to fit within the GT's dramatically tapered bodywork, a design dictated by the racing variant's aerodynamic requirements. The GT is certainly not lacking for theater. Our base in the Pays de la Loire is the appropriately named Hôtel de France in La Chartre-sur-le-Loire, around 30 miles from the circuit and previously the encampment of the original Ford GT40 works effort in the 60s. Since then, it has become a magnet for race fans. Its rooms are named after famous drivers, making it possible to have an excellent 3-course dinner with wine and then charge it to Derek Bell. Yet while the local population has grown used to seeing all manner of exotica parked in the square outside, the GT is still special enough to draw spectators as it is unloaded from the transporter and warms up just after dawn. While many supercars have been tucked and tweaked to spawn competition variants, the Ford GT is a race car that has been legalized for road use. The lack of practicality struck us when we first drove it briefly on the track, and 2 days of frequent ingress and egress make the point more clearly. The GT is a masterpiece of minimalism. Apart from the infotainment system, the cockpit contains nothing that is not either functional or necessary. At first, the cabin feels basic and frankly cheap, but we soon came to appreciate the simplicity and lack of distraction, from the rotary climate controls that would barely have passed muster in a rental-grade Taurus 15 years ago to a digital dashboard that is a model of clarity and concision. Getting in is an acquired skill, one earned at the cost of a few bruises. The easiest technique is to sit on the fat sill and then effectively fall backward into the seat. There's enough clearance from the A-pillar to allow legs to be swung inboard. The seats don't move fore or aft. Indeed, they are little more than strategically padded carbon shells, and driver and co-pilot sit close enough to trade STDs. The tiny luggage space behind the engine under the rear cover is practically filled by the two high-visibility vests that French law requires we carry. If a GT owner wants to take something on a trip, he will need to either wear it, strap it to the roof, or send it ahead via FedEx. Just leaving La Chartre-sur-Loire provides some early thrills. The GT's low-speed manners are fine, but its width and radically inboard driving position turn narrow French roads and oncoming traffic into a palm-prickling adventure. While our support team has no shortage of tires, it carries no replacement body panels. From the cockpit, visibility is limited by the shallow glass line and low windshield, as you would expect in a car just 43.7 inches tall. So the apexes of shallow right-hand corners have to be spotted from around the rear-view mirror. The wind tunnel dictated the narrow cabin and its compromises as much as the designers did. The radical front-to-rear taper of the cockpit keeps airflow attached to the body, rather than roiling over the carbon fiber panels with drag-raising turbulence. The mighty 647 horsepower V6 is the GT's defining feature. It is its heart, its soul, and its tinnitus-inducing entertainment system. The feeble efforts of the four-speaker factory audio are drowned out as soon as the car starts to move. It's a constant reminder of the GT's racing pedigree, idling with a brooding tone and, although tractable under gentle use, occasionally stuttering and snuffling as it tries to clear its throat. There's plenty of turbo lag, replaced in short order by the rapidly swelling sensation of arriving boost. Keep accelerating, and the noises passing through the rear bulkhead get angrier and darker. Dulcet, melodious, and tuneful are just three of the adjectives that will never be applied to the GT soundtrack. Taster's notes included chainsaws, Africanized bees, and hints of hurricane, with noise trapped and reverberating in the tight-fitting carbon fiber box that is the cabin. Yet the GT's sensory overload makes it thrilling in a way that most modern breed house-trained supercars rarely are, and it more than offsets any on-paper performance deficit. We had rain for much of our time in France, which put the track-biased Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 tires in an appropriately Gallic state of existential angst. Any car that tries to spin its rear wheels at 4,000 revolutions per minute in third gear on half throttle is not short on thrills. But the GT didn't feel scary even in proximity to its weather-reduced limits. It is one of those cars that pretty much always shouts encouragement at the driver to try harder. On drier roads, the LED upshit lights integrated into the top of the steering wheel goad one on, and getting even the first green one to flare feels like an accomplishment. The blue lights at the far end of the LED window might warn of the modest 7,000 revolution per minute red line, but getting them illuminated feels positively daring. Although our time on the closed parts of the circuit is constrained, we have free reign of the sizable section of the 24-hour course that consists of public roads, most famous of which is the 3.7-mile-long Mulsanne Straight, part of Route Départementale D338. The straight is now curtailed by two chicanes during the race but, in the event's heyday, was once the scene of some of the highest speeds ever witnessed in racing. In 1988, a Group C Peugeot prototype set a Le Mans speed trap record of 252 miles per hour. There is no chance of a record today, or indeed of breaking the normal 90 km/h speed limit by any significant degree, thanks to traffic, much of which is oncoming. Yes, the GT can be driven at an everyday pace without drama, but it does not like to do so. Every part of the car has been designed for higher speeds and higher loadings. The carbon ceramic brakes grouch out their protest when cold, and the pedal is light and hard to modulate under gentle pressure, the brakes needing heat to work properly. The dual-clutch automatic doesn't change ratios with the snap and precision of, say, Porsche's PDK, and manual mode is selected by a fiddly button at the center of the rotary transmission controller. Yet while the GT's powertrain feels no less aggressive on the road than it does on track, the chassis has a gentler side, a sense of lightness and delicacy in contrast to the brutality of the power delivery. Ride is firm in any of the drive modes, but both normal and the slightly stiffer sport give damping compliance to cope with surfaces that look as if they could shake the car to pieces. Credit goes largely to Multimatic spool valve dampers, fitted here with an electronically adjustable element. Ford's use of both a traditional coil and a torsion bar spring at each corner allows the GT to assume a stiffer spring rate when it crouches down 2 inches into its lowered ride height. The same hydraulic actuators that compress and lock out the coil springs and track, a mode we are expressly forbidden to select on road, operate a nose lifting system that deploys in approximately 1 second, faster than pretty much any other. It pops the front of the car up, rather than drawing out the ballet. It's effective, too. During 2 days and nearly 300 miles, we don't grind the nose on any of the many speed bumps we encounter. And it would be impossible to grow bored with the steering, gregarious and alive with unfiltered feedback rather than merely chatty. The fat-trimmed wheel relays bumps and camber changes and even slight alterations in surface texture. The GT feels like it can be placed with an accuracy of well under an inch. With a fixed-ratio steering rack and an electro-hydraulic pump providing the power assist, responses are fast but not darty, and it's easy to keep the front end under control as the rear considers slipping.